In a palace filled with secrets, a child lost their voice to a devastating trauma. A mysterious deaf young woman enters their life, unaware that she will change everything. Music becomes the bridge between two worlds, isolated by pain. When the truth comes to light, one choice can change their destinies forever. Before discovering this enchanting story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more heartfelt tales. The morning sun reflected off the waters of the Hudson River in New York City, creating a spectacle of light dancing on the rippling surface. It was another seemingly ordinary day in the city of skyscrapers, but for Lily, a 25-year-old woman, it would be the start of a journey that would change her life forever. Lily sat in a simple ferryboat, shared with other tourists enjoying the morning ride. Her brown eyes keenly observed every detail of the New York architecture surrounding them, while her fingers played absent-mindedly with the fringe of her colorful shawl. To anyone who saw her, Lily seemed just another tourist enchanted by the beauty of New York. However, there was something special about her that set her apart from the others. Lily was deaf. From a young age, she had learned to communicate through sign language and lip reading. Her condition never prevented her from dreaming big and seeking new challenges. It was this adventurous spirit that brought her to New York, in search of a job opportunity that promised to be unique. As the ferry glided smoothly across the water, Lily noticed a water taxi approaching. In it, an elegantly dressed woman caught her attention. The stranger had perfectly styled blonde hair and wore an impeccable tailored suit that screamed money from every pore. Her blue eyes, cold as ice, scanned the ferry passengers with an air of superiority. Suddenly, the elegant woman made a comment, and Lily noticed that everyone around her started laughing. She didn't need to hear to understand what was happening. Years of experience had taught her to recognize when she was the target of mockery. The expression on the woman's face and the furtive glances in her direction were clear signs. But Lily didn't react. She remained serene, with her chin held high and a slight smile on her lips. Her inner strength was greater than any provocation. She knew that her true journey was just beginning, and she wouldn't allow an unpleasant incident to overshadow her determination. When the ferry finally docked, Lily was the first to disembark. Her steps were firm and decisive as she walked through the narrow streets of Lower Manhattan. The map on her cell phone indicated the way to the Grandview Mansion, an imposing building that would be her workplace for the next few months. Upon arriving at the mansion's gates, Lily was greeted by a middle-aged woman dressed in an impeccable uniform. It was Julia, the housekeeper. With a gentle smile, she greeted Lily in sign language, surprising her positively. "Welcome to Grandview Mansion, Miss Lily," Julia signed. "I hope your journey was pleasant." Lily returned the smile, relieved to find someone who communicated in her language. "Thank you, it was a smooth trip," she replied. "I'm excited to start my work here." Julia nodded and gestured for Lily to follow her inside the mansion. As they walked through the ornate corridors, the housekeeper explained the house rules and Lily's responsibilities. "Your main job will be to care for young Matthew, Mr. Grandview's son," Julia signed. "He's 10 years old and, well, he has special needs." Lily noticed Julia's hesitation and raised an eyebrow, encouraging her to continue. "Matthew doesn't speak," explained the housekeeper. "He suffered a trauma 2 years ago, and since then has closed himself off in a world of silence. Mr. Grandview hired you hoping that your experience with nonverbal communication might help Matthew in some way." The revelation touched Lily deeply. She knew the world of silence well and knew how lonely it could be. Her heart filled with compassion for the boy she had yet to meet. "I'll do my best to help him," Lily promised. Julia smiled, but there was a shadow of concern in her eyes. "There's one more thing you should know," she continued. "Matthew has a therapist, Dr. Isabella. She has quite particular methods. It's important that you don't interfere with her work." Lily nodded, although something in Julia's expression intrigued her. There was more to this story than the housekeeper was telling, but she knew she would have to find out for herself. Finally, they reached a room on the second floor of the mansion. Julia knocked softly on the door before opening it. "Matthew, dear, your new caregiver is here," she said aloud, although she knew Lily couldn't hear her. Lily entered the room and her heart nearly stopped. Sitting near the window, looking out at the city skyline, was a dark-haired boy with deeply sad eyes. He didn't turn when they entered, continuing to stare at the horizon as if lost in his own thoughts. Slowly, Lily approached. She didn't want to startle him or invade his space. When she was a few steps away, she knelt to be at his eye level and waited patiently. After a few moments, Matthew finally turned his head. His eyes met Lily's, and for a brief instant, she saw a flicker of curiosity in them. It was as if, for the first time in a long time, something had sparked his interest. Lily smiled gently and raised her hands, making a simple gesture in sign language. "Hello, I'm Lily. I'm here to be your friend." To her surprise, Matthew tilted his head slightly, as if intrigued by the movements of her hands. There was no verbal or signed response, but that small gesture of acknowledgement was enough to ignite a spark of hope in Lily's heart. At that moment, she knew her mission went far beyond being just a caregiver. She was there to help Matthew find his voice, whatever it might be. And as she watched the boy turn his attention back to the window, Lily made a silent promise to herself. She would do everything in her power to bring light back to this child's eyes. What Lily didn't know was that her presence at Grandview Mansion would trigger a series of events that would change not only Matthew's life, but also her own. Fate had traced an intricate path for her, full of challenges, revelations, and perhaps even an unexpected love. As the sun began to set over the waters of New York, casting a golden glow over the Hudson River, Lily prepared for her first night in the mansion. The day had been full of new impressions and information, but she could hardly wait for what tomorrow would bring. Little did she know that in the corridors of that old mansion, secrets were about to be revealed, and lives were about to intertwine, in ways that no one could predict. The dawn in New York painted the sky with soft shades of pink and orange, reflecting off the calm waters of the Hudson River. At Grandview Mansion, Lily woke up early, eager to start her first full day as Matthew's caregiver. She dressed carefully, choosing colorful and comfortable clothes, hoping they might spark the boy's interest. As she left her room on the staff floor, Lily was greeted by Julia, who was waiting for her in the hallway with a warm smile. "Good morning, Lily," Julia signed. "I hope you slept well. Come, I'll show you how we prepare young Matthew's breakfast." Together they went down to the kitchen, a spacious and well-equipped environment that contrasted with the antiquity of the rest of the mansion. Julia carefully explained the morning routine, showing Lily how Matthew liked his breakfast: toast with butter and honey, fresh fruit cut into geometric shapes, and a glass of warm milk with a pinch of cinnamon. "Remember," Julia signed, "it's important to maintain a routine. Matthew feels safer when things are predictable." Lily nodded, absorbing every detail. As she arranged the tray, she had an idea. She took a sheet of paper and a colored pencil, quickly drawing a smiling face next to the plate. It was a simple gesture, but she hoped it might bring a bit of joy to the start of Matthew's day. With the tray ready, Lily climbed the stairs towards the boy's room. Her heart beat a little faster, mixing anxiety and expectation. Upon reaching the door, she took a deep breath before knocking softly. There was no response, as she had expected. Slowly, Lily opened the door and entered the room. Matthew was sitting in the same position as the day before, looking out the window. The morning light illuminated his pale face, highlighting the dark circles that spoke of sleepless nights. Lily approached carefully, placing the tray on the bedside table. She moved into Matthew's field of vision and smiled, making a gentle "good morning" gesture in sign language. To her surprise, Matthew turned slightly towards her. His eyes landed on the tray, and for a brief moment, Lily saw a flicker of interest pass over his face as he noticed the drawing. It was a subtle change, almost imperceptible, but to Lily it was as if the sun had shone brighter for an instant. Encouraged, Lily took out the notepad and pencil she always carried with her. Quickly, she sketched a cartoon version of herself, with a big smile and hands making the sign for friend. Next to it, she drew a question mark and a figure representing Matthew. She showed the drawing to the boy, her eyes shining with hope. Matthew looked at the paper for a few seconds, his expression unreadable. Then, to Lily's astonishment, he hesitantly extended his hand towards the notepad. Lily's heart leaped. It was the first voluntary gesture she had seen him make. Carefully, she handed the notepad and pencil to Matthew, holding her breath as she watched. Matthew held the pencil awkwardly, as if he wasn't used to using it. His strokes were uncertain, but gradually a shape began to come to life on the paper. It was a simple, almost childlike drawing, a solitary figure in a dark room. Lily felt a lump in her throat as she saw the image. It was such a raw and honest representation of Matthew's loneliness that it was painful to see. But it was also a beginning, a small window into the boy's inner world. She was about to respond when the door opened abruptly. Lily turned, surprised, and her heart nearly stopped. There, standing in the doorway, was the same elegant woman who had mocked her the day before on the ferry. "What's going on here?" The woman's voice was as sharp as ice, though Lily could only see her lips moving. Julia appeared right behind, her face a mask of concern. "Dr. Isabella," she said, turning to Lily to translate into signs. "This is Lily, Matthew's new caregiver." Dr. Isabella examined Lily from head to toe with a disdainful look. "Ah, yes, the deaf girl." Her tone was clearly disapproving. "I hope you're aware that you shouldn't interfere with my work with Matthew." Lily stood firm, holding the doctor's gaze. She took her notepad and wrote quickly, "I'm here to help Matthew. I believe we can work together for his benefit." Dr. Isabella read the note and gave a dry laugh. "Dear, you have no qualifications to help Matthew. I am a trained professional with years of experience. What do you have? A handicap and good intentions?" Julia looked uncomfortable, alternating her gaze between Lily and the doctor. Matthew, in turn, had shrunk into his chair, his face a mask of anxiety. Lily felt a wave of indignation rise in her chest, but she maintained her composure. She wrote another note. "My disability, as you call it, has given me a unique perspective on nonverbal communication. I'm here to offer that perspective." Dr. Isabella narrowed her eyes, clearly irritated by the response. "Well, we'll see how long this lasts. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a session with Matthew." She made an imperious gesture for Lily and Julia to leave the room. Lily hesitated, looking at Matthew. The boy seemed even more withdrawn, his eyes fixed on the floor. She wanted to stay, to protect him somehow, but she knew she couldn't openly challenge the doctor's authority, at least not yet. With a heavy heart, Lily followed Julia out of the room. Before leaving, she cast one last look at Matthew, trying to convey a message of comfort and promise with her eyes. "I'll be back. I won't give up on you." The door closed behind them with a soft click, but to Lily, it sounded like the thunderclap of an accepted challenge. She knew she had encountered not just an obstacle in her work, but a true antagonist. As she walked down the hallway with Julia, her mind was already working on ways to circumvent Dr. Isabella's influence and reach Matthew. The small progress she had made that morning, however subtle, had convinced her that there was hope, and Lily was determined not to let anyone, not even an arrogant doctor, prevent her from helping this boy find his voice. The day had only just begun, and Lily knew that many challenges were still to come. But as the New York sun rose in the sky, bathing the city in a golden light, she felt a renewed determination growing within her. This would be a battle of wills, of methods, and above all, of compassion. And Lily was ready to fight with all her strength. The days that followed at Grandview Mansion were a constant challenge for Lily. Each morning brought with it a new silent battle between her and Dr. Isabella, with Matthew at the center of a whirlwind of unspoken tensions. Lily strived to establish a connection with the boy, while the therapist seemed determined to maintain her dominion over the treatment. On a particularly hot afternoon, Lily was in the mansion's garden, tending to a small flower bed that she had started as a project to involve Matthew. The boy was sitting in the shade of an old oak tree, observing her with a silent interest that she had learned to recognize as a positive sign. As she planted some daisies, Lily felt a presence behind her. Turning around, she came face to face with a tall, middle-aged man with tired but kind eyes. Immediately, she recognized the features she had seen in Matthew. This must be Mr. Grandview. the boy's father. The man smiled hesitantly and made an awkward gesture with his hands, which Lily recognized as an attempt at sign language communication. Her heart warmed at the effort. "Hello," he signed slowly. "I'm Mark Grandview, Matthew's father. You must be Lily." Lily nodded, smiling encouragingly. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Grandview," she replied in signs. "Matthew is a wonderful boy." Mark's face lit up at hearing this, but soon a shadow of sadness passed over his eyes. "He wasn't always like this," he said, his voice low and his signs hesitant. "Before the accident, he was full of life, always talking and laughing." Lily tilted her head, curious. It was the first time anyone had directly mentioned what had happened to Matthew. "The accident?" she asked gently. Mark sighed deeply, his shoulders slumping as if they carried the weight of the world. He looked at Matthew, who continued to sit under the oak tree, apparently oblivious to the conversation. "It was 2 years ago," Mark began, his voice trembling. "There was a fire at our country house. Matthew was there with his mother, my wife, Sarah." Lily felt her heart tighten, anticipating what was to come next. "Sarah couldn't get out in time," Mark continued, unshed tears shining in his eyes. "Matthew saw everything. He was outside screaming for her, but there was nothing he could do." The silence that followed was heavy, laden with pain and loss. Lily fought against her own tears, imagining the trauma that little Matthew must have experienced. "Since that day," Mark went on, "he hasn't said a word. It's as if his voice was consumed along with the flames." Lily nodded understandingly, her heart overflowing with compassion. Now she better understood the depth of Matthew's silence, the weight of the memories that surrounded him. "Mr. Grandview," she signed gently, "I can't imagine the pain you and Matthew have gone through, but I want you to know that I'm here to help in any way I can." Mark smiled sadly. "Thank you, Lily. Dr. Isabella has been working with him since the accident, but—" He hesitated, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Sometimes I wonder if her methods are the most appropriate." Lily felt a spark of hope ignite in her chest. Perhaps she could find an ally in Mark. "I believe each child is unique," she replied, "and sometimes we need to find unconventional paths to reach them." Mark nodded thoughtfully. "You're right. You know, Lily, in the few days you've been here, I've noticed a subtle change in Matthew. It's almost imperceptible, but it's there. A curiosity in his eyes that I haven't seen in a long time." Lily felt her heart fill with emotion. It was the first time anyone had acknowledged her efforts, however small the results had been so far. At that moment, Matthew stood up and walked slowly towards them. He stopped a few steps away, his eyes alternating between Lily and his father. There was something in his gaze, an unformulated question. Lily had a sudden idea. She picked one of the daisies she had just planted and gently offered it to Matthew. The boy looked at the flower for a long moment before hesitantly extending his hand and taking it. It was a simple gesture, but laden with meaning. Mark gasped, softly beside her, clearly moved by the interaction. "Lily," Mark signed, his voice choked with emotion, "please continue what you're doing. I know Dr. Isabella can be difficult at times, but I'll talk to her. Your work here is important." Lily nodded, grateful for the support. As she watched Matthew gently twirl the daisy between his fingers, she felt a renewed determination grow within her. The path ahead would be difficult, but now she had hope. And sometimes, hope was all that was needed to begin healing deep wounds. The sun began to set over New York, casting long shadows across the mansion's garden. Lily reflected on the day's revelations. The puzzle that was Matthew was beginning to take shape, although many pieces were still missing. She knew she would face more obstacles, especially from Dr. Isabella, but she was prepared for the challenge. That night, as she prepared for bed, Lily made a silent promise to herself and to Matthew. She would find a way to bring light back into his life, no matter the cost. With that comforting thought, she fell asleep, dreaming of a future where Matthew's laughter echoed through the corridors of Grandview Mansion, chasing away the shadows of the past. The weeks passed at Grandview Mansion, and Lily's routine began to gain its own rhythm. Each morning brought small challenges and equally small but significant victories. She had grown accustomed to communicating with Matthew through subtle gestures, facial expressions, and occasionally simple drawings. On a particularly pleasant afternoon, Lily decided to take Matthew for a walk through the less frequented corridors of the mansion. She hoped that the change of environment might stimulate the boy's curiosity. As they walked side by side, Lily noticed that Matthew seemed more relaxed, his eyes wandering over the paintings and ancient tapestries that adorned the walls. Suddenly, a soft sound caught both their attention. It was a distant, almost ethereal melody that seemed to float through the corridors. Lily couldn't hear it, but she felt the vibrations in the air and saw the immediate change in Matthew's posture. The boy stopped, his eyes widening with an expression that Lily had never seen before, pure fascination. Guided by curiosity, they followed the source of the sound until they reached a half-open door. Lily peeked inside and saw a room that appeared to be an old music room. In the center, seated in front of a grand piano, was Mark Grandview, his fingers dancing softly over the keys. Matthew took a hesitant step towards the door, as if being drawn by the music. Lily gently placed her hand on his shoulder, silently asking if he wanted to enter. To her surprise, Matthew nodded slightly. As they entered the room, Mark stopped playing and turned around, surprised to see his son there. "Matthew," he said, his voice choked with emotion. Lily read his lips and saw hope shining in his eyes. Matthew slowly approached the piano, his eyes fixed on the keys. Mark watched, holding his breath, while Lily remained a few steps behind, not wanting to interfere in the moment. With a hesitation that broke Lily's heart, Matthew extended his hand and touched a single key. The note resonated through the room, clear and pure. The boy closed his eyes as if savoring the sound. Mark looked at Lily, unshed tears shining in his eyes. "Sarah," he said softly, "my wife. She used to play for Matthew every night." Lily felt her heart tighten at the revelation. The music wasn't just a sound for Matthew. It was a connection to his lost mother, a memory that silence hadn't been able to completely erase. Encouraged by his son's reaction, Mark began to play again, this time a soft and comforting melody. Lily watched, amazed, as Matthew closed his eyes, his body swaying almost imperceptibly to the rhythm of the music. It was at that moment that the door opened abruptly, revealing Dr. Isabella. Her face was contorted in an expression of disapproval. "What's going on here?" she demanded, her voice sharp. The music stopped abruptly, and Matthew flinched as if he had been caught doing something wrong. Mark stood up, a mixture of frustration and determination on his face. "Isabella," he said firmly, "we were having an important moment here." Dr. Isabella frowned. "Mr. Grandview, we've discussed this. Exposing Matthew to intense emotional stimuli can be detrimental to his progress. Music, especially, can bring up traumatic memories." Lily felt a wave of indignation grow inside her. She took her notepad and wrote quickly, "With all due respect, Dr. Isabella, what we saw here was progress. Matthew responded to the music in a way I've never seen him respond to anything before." The doctor read the note and gave a dry laugh. "Miss Lily, your enthusiasm is touching, but you don't have the necessary training to make that kind of assessment. We're dealing with deep trauma here, not a simple music lesson." Mark intervened, his voice firm but gentle. "Isabella, I understand your concern, but I also trust what I saw today. Perhaps it's time we considered alternative approaches." "Doctor," Isabella seemed about to protest, but then her eyes fell on Matthew. The boy was staring fixedly at the piano, an expression of longing on his face that was impossible to ignore. For a moment, silence reigned in the room, heavy with unresolved tension and unexplored possibilities. Finally, Dr. Isabella let out a resigned sigh. "Very well," she said, her voice still laden with skepticism. "We can try to incorporate some music therapy into our program. But," she added, casting a sharp look at Lily, "this will be done under my strict supervision." Lily nodded, knowing that this was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. She looked at Matthew, who was still absorbed in the piano, and felt a wave of renewed hope. Perhaps through music, they could finally begin to break down the barriers that kept Matthew trapped in his silent world. As everyone left the music room, Lily couldn't help but notice how Matthew was reluctant to move away from the piano. It was as if an invisible thread was pulling him back, a long-lost connection that was beginning to reforge itself. That night, lying in her bed, Lily reflected on the day's events. Music had opened a door that they didn't even know existed. It was a beginning, a glimpse of hope amid the darkness of Matthew's trauma. But Lily knew that the path ahead would still be difficult. Dr. Isabella would continue to be an obstacle, and Matthew himself still had a long way to go. However, for the first time since she had arrived at Grandview Mansion, Lily felt they were truly making progress. With that comforting thought, she fell asleep, dreaming of melodies that could heal broken hearts and words that could finally find their way through the silence. The days that followed the discovery in the music room brought a new energy to Grandview Mansion. Matthew's routine now included daily music therapy sessions, supervised by Dr. Isabella, but with Lily's constant presence. On a sunny morning, Lily entered Matthew's room to find him already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed with an expression of anticipation that she rarely saw on his face. She smiled, feeling a wave of hope as she realized the boy was eager for his music session. As they walked together through the mansion's corridors towards the music room, Lily noticed something different about Matthew. His steps seemed lighter, and there was a sparkle in his eyes that she hadn't seen before. It was as if the music had awakened something inside him, a spark of life that had been dormant for so long. As they entered the room, they found Mark, already seated at the piano with Dr. Isabella standing beside him, her expression as serious as ever. Lily greeted everyone with a nod, discreetly positioning herself, sat in a corner of the room. "Good morning, Matthew," said Mark, smiling warmly at his son. "Are you ready for our session today?" Matthew nodded slightly, a gesture so subtle that it could have gone unnoticed if it weren't for Lily's constant attention. Dr. Isabella made some notes on her clipboard, her eyes analyzing every movement of the boy. Mark began to play a soft melody, the notes flowing smoothly through the air. Lily watched, fascinated, as Matthew closed his eyes, his body visibly relaxing to the sound of the music. It was as if the notes enveloped him in an invisible embrace, offering comfort and security. After a few minutes, Mark stopped playing and looked at Matthew expectantly. "Would you like to try, son?" he asked gently. To everyone's surprise, Matthew slowly approached the piano. His hands hovered over the keys for a moment, trembling slightly. Then, with a determination that made Lily's heart leap, he pressed a key. The sound echoed through the room, clear and pure. Matthew looked up, his eyes meeting his father's. There was a silent question there, a search for approval. "That's right, Matthew," Mark encouraged, his voice choked with emotion. "Keep going." Encouraged, Matthew began to press more keys, creating a sequence of disconnected notes but full of meaning. It wasn't a recognizable melody, but to everyone in the room it was the most beautiful music they had ever heard. Lily watched, tears in her eyes, feeling the vibrations of the music in the air. She could see the emotion on the faces of Mark and Dr. Isabella, and for the first time, she saw the doctor's professional mask falter. Suddenly, Matthew stopped playing. He looked at his hands, then at his father, and finally at Lily. His lips moved, forming a silent word. "Mama." The silence that followed was deafening. Mark gasped, his hands trembling over the piano keys. Dr. Isabella dropped her clipboard, the sound echoing through the room. Lily slowly approached Matthew, kneeling beside him. She took his hands in hers, looking directly into his eyes. "It's okay, Matthew," she signed gently. "Your mother would be very proud of you." Tears began to stream down Matthew's face, silent but laden with emotion. Mark joined them, wrapping his son in a tight embrace. Dr. Isabella watched the scene, a mixture of surprise and what seemed to be reluctant respect on her face. At that moment, Lily knew they had reached a turning point. Music wasn't just therapy. It was a language that Matthew could understand, a means of expressing the emotions he had kept locked away for so long. In the days that followed, music sessions became the highlight of Matthew's day. He still didn't speak much, but the words began to come hesitant at first, then with growing confidence. They were mostly single words: water, piano, dad, but each one was celebrated as a precious victory. One afternoon, as Lily and Matthew were sitting in the garden, sketching together, the boy suddenly stopped and looked at her with an intensity that surprised her. "Lily," he said, his voice still hoarse but clear. "Thank you." Lily felt tears welling up in her eyes. She took Matthew's hand and squeezed it gently. "You're welcome, Matthew," she signed. "I'm so proud of you." That night, as the sun set over New York, casting a golden glow over the skyline, Lily reflected on how far they had come. The silence that once dominated Grandview Mansion was slowly being filled with music, words, and laughter. However, as she approached her bed, Lily couldn't help but feel a pang of apprehension. Matthew's progress was undeniable, but with each word he spoke, with each memory that resurfaced, they were getting closer to the core of his trauma. The fire, the loss of his mother, these were topics that had not yet been directly addressed. Lily knew that facing these painful memories would be the next big challenge, but now for the first time she truly believed that Matthew would have the strength to do it. With the support of his father, the guidance of Dr. Isabella, who now seemed much more open to alternative approaches, and the comfort of music, Matthew was finally beginning to find his voice. As she fell asleep, Lily wondered what the future held for all of them. The path ahead would still be difficult, full of emotional obstacles and painful memories, but there was hope now. A hope that shone as bright as the lights of New York reflected in the dark waters of the Hudson River. And so, with the distant sound of a piano melody echoing through the corridors of the mansion, Lily closed her eyes, dreaming of a future where Matthew's silence would be just a distant memory, replaced by the music of a full and happy life. Winter had come to New York, bringing with it dense fogs that enveloped the city like a cloak of mystery. At Grandview Mansion, the cold seemed to intensify the emotions that hung in the air, creating an atmosphere of expectation and apprehension. Matthew had made remarkable progress in recent months. His words, once rare and hesitant, now flowed more frequently, although they were still far from fluent conversation. Music continued to be his main form of expression, and his piano skills improved every day. On a particularly cold morning, Lily found Matthew in the music room, his fingers sliding over the piano keys with an intensity she rarely saw. The melody was somber, almost anguished, and Lily felt a tightness in her heart as she recognized the signs of agitation in the boy. "Matthew," she signed gently, approaching carefully. "Is everything okay?" The boy stopped playing abruptly, his hands trembling slightly over the keys. He looked at Lily, his eyes full of an emotion she couldn't completely decipher. "Dream," he said, his voice low and trembling. "Fire." Lily felt her heart clench. It was the first time Matthew had directly mentioned the fire that had taken his mother's life. She knew this moment would eventually come, but that didn't make it any less painful. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked gently, sitting beside him on the piano bench. Matthew hesitated, his eyes moving nervously around the room. Finally, he nodded, although his entire body seemed tense with the prospect. At that moment, Mark entered the room, followed closely by Dr. Isabella. Both stopped upon seeing the scene before them, instinctively sensing that something important was about to happen. "Matthew," Mark said softly, approaching carefully. "What's going on, son?" The boy looked at his father, then back at Lily. His hands moved hesitantly, forming signs that he and Lily had developed together over the months. "He had a dream," Lily translated for Mark and Dr. Isabella. "About the fire." The tension in the room was palpable. Dr. Isabella stepped forward, her expression a mixture of professional concern and genuine empathy. "Matthew," she said gently, "do you feel ready to talk about it?" To everyone's surprise, Matthew nodded. Again, he looked at the piano, his hands resting softly on the keys, as if seeking comfort in the familiarity of the instrument. It was dark, he began, his voice almost a whisper. Smoke everywhere. Mark moved to sit on the other side of Matthew, placing a protective arm around his son's shoulders. Lily watched carefully, ready to offer support if needed. Mom was screaming, Matthew continued, tears beginning to stream down his cheeks. I wanted to help, but I couldn't reach her. The room fell silent, broken only by Matthew's soft sobs. Mark pulled him closer, his own tears falling silently. It wasn't your fault, Matthew, Mark said, his voice choked with emotion. You were just a child. There was nothing you could have done. Dr. Isabella knelt in front of Matthew, her face gentle and understanding. Matthew, what you're feeling now is perfectly normal. Traumas like this take time to heal, but you're taking incredible steps in the right direction. Lily watched, feeling a mixture of pride and pain for Matthew. She knew how much it must have cost him to relive these memories, but she also knew it was a crucial step in his healing journey. Suddenly, Matthew turned to the piano. His hands, still trembling, began to play a melody. It was the same lullaby he had played weeks ago, his mother's song. But this time there was something different about it, a note of hope, a touch of light amid the darkness of memory. As the music filled the room, Lily saw something change in Matthew's face. The pain was still there, but there was also a kind of release, as if by sharing his burden, he had finally begun to lighten it. Mark, with tears in his eyes, began to sing softly along with the melody. His voice was hoarse and imperfect, but laden with love and shared memories. Dr. Isabella watched the scene with a mixture of admiration and professional respect. She turned to Lily, a small smile on her lips. You were right, she admitted quietly. Music is a powerful language. As the song came to an end, Matthew looked up, first at his father, then at Lily, and finally at Dr. Isabella. There was a new light in his eyes, a mixture of pain and courage that spoke of an important step towards healing. I miss her, he said simply, his voice firmer than before. I do too, son, Mark replied, pulling Matthew into a tight hug. And she would be so proud of you, right now. That night, as the fog thickened over New York, enveloping Grandview Mansion in a silent embrace, Lily reflected on the day's events. The path ahead would still be long, and no doubt there would be more difficult moments. But today Matthew had faced his deepest fears and emerged stronger. Music continued to echo softly through the corridors of the mansion, a constant reminder of the power of expression, healing, and love. And as Lily fell asleep, she dreamed of a future where the shadows of Matthew's past would finally be dissipated, replaced by the bright light of a full and happy life. Spring arrived in New York, bringing with it an explosion of colors and new life. At Grandview Mansion, the changes of the season seemed to reflect the internal transformations occurring in its inhabitants, especially in Matthew. In the weeks following his brave confrontation with the memories of the fire, Matthew demonstrated surprising resilience. His speech, once hesitant and sporadic, became more fluent each day. He still preferred to express himself through music, but now his words flowed more easily, like a newly thawed stream in spring. On a particularly sunny morning, Lily found Matthew in the mansion's garden, sitting under the old oak tree. To her surprise, he wasn't alone. Mark was by his side, and between them was a large photo album. Lily approached quietly, not wanting to interrupt the moment. Matthew looked up and smiled, a gesture that still made Lily's heart leap with joy every time she saw it. Lily, he called, his voice clear and confident. Come see. She joined them, sitting on the soft grass. Mark greeted her with a warm smile, his eyes shining with a mixture of emotion and gratitude. We're looking at old photos, explained Mark. Matthew asked to see pictures of his mother. Lily felt a lump in her throat. It was a huge step for Matthew, facing his mother's memories so directly. Matthew turned a page of the album, revealing a photo of a beautiful woman with dark hair and bright eyes. She was smiling, holding a much younger Matthew in her arms. Mum, Matthew said softly, tracing the image with his finger. She was singing here, I remember. Mark nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. "Yes, son. It was your 5th birthday. She sang that lullaby you love." Matthew looked at Lily, a small smile playing on his lips. "The song I play on the piano," he explained. It was hers. Lily felt her heart fill with emotion. It was the first time Matthew had spoken so openly about his mother, connecting his memories with the music that had become so important in his recovery. At that moment, Dr. Isabella appeared in the garden. She paused for a moment, observing the scene before her with an expression of surprise and admiration. "Good morning, everyone," she said, approaching with a genuine smile. "I see we're having an impromptu therapy session here." Mark gestured, inviting her to join them. Dr. Isabella sat down, her eyes scanning the photos with interest. "Matthew," she said gently, "how are you feeling looking at these photos?" The boy thought for a moment before answering. "Happy," he said finally, "and a little sad too, but it's okay." Dr. Isabella nodded, clearly impressed with the emotional maturity Matthew was showing. "It's perfectly normal to feel that way," she assured. "These memories are precious, even when they bring a bit of sadness." Matthew agreed, turning his attention back to the album. He turned a few more pages, stopping at a photo that showed the whole family in front of a country house. "Our house," he said, his voice getting a little lower, "before the fire." Lily felt the tension in the air, everyone holding their breath, waiting to see how Matthew would handle this specific memory. To everyone's surprise, Matthew took a deep breath and continued speaking. "I used to be afraid to think about it," he admitted, "but now I want to remember. The good things, you know." Mark pulled Matthew close, kissing the top of his head. "I'm so proud of you, son," he murmured. Dr. Isabella exchanged a meaningful look with Lily. "This is incredible progress, Matthew," she said. "You're learning to integrate all your memories, the happy and the sad ones. This is a very important part of healing." Lily watched, amazed at the strength and courage Matthew was showing. She remembered the silent and withdrawn boy she had met months ago, and the contrast with the Matthew of now was striking. "Lily," Matthew called, pulling her from her thoughts. "Can I play some music for you later? I want to compose something new." Lily's heart filled with joy. "Of course, Matthew," she signed enthusiastically. "I can't wait to hear it." The rest of the morning passed in an atmosphere of calm reflection. Matthew continued to share memories, some happy, others more difficult, but all part of his healing journey. Mark, Lily, and Dr. Isabella listened, offering support and guidance when needed. As the sun rose in the sky, bathing the garden in a golden light, Lily couldn't help but feel a wave of optimism. The path ahead would still be long, but Matthew had taken giant steps. He was learning not only to speak again, but to process his emotions in a healthy way. As the group got up to go back inside, Matthew took Lily's hand. "Thank you," he said, simply, his eyes conveying more than words could express. Lily squeezed his hand gently, feeling a wave of emotion. She knew her work at Grandview Mansion was far from over, but at that moment she felt deeply grateful to be part of this extraordinary journey. As they walked back to the mansion, the distant sound of ferries on the river mingled with the singing of birds in the garden. It was a symphony of life and renewal, a promise of brighter days to come. And at the center of it all was Matthew, no longer trapped in silence, but ready to compose his own melody of healing and hope. The New York summer was in full swing, the intense heat turning the Hudson River into a shimmering mirror reflecting the cloudless blue sky. At Grandview Mansion, the windows were open, letting in the occasional breeze that brought with it the scent of the sea and jasmine. Matthew, now 11 years old, was sitting at the piano in the music room, his fingers dancing over the keys, with a confidence that would have been unimaginable a few months ago. The melody he was playing was entirely his own, an original composition he had been working on for the past few weeks. Lily watched from the doorway, her heart full of pride. Matthew's progress had been nothing short of extraordinary. He not only spoke more frequently and fluently, but also demonstrated growing independence and self-confidence. When the music came to an end, Matthew looked up, a smile lighting up his face as he saw Lily. "What did you think?" he asked eagerly. Lily approached, her hands moving gracefully as she signed. "It was beautiful, Matthew. You captured so many different emotions. Joy, longing, hope. It's really impressive." Matthew's face lit up with the praise. "Thank you. I want to show it to Dad and Dr. Isabella too. Do you think they'll like it?" "I'm sure they'll love it," Lily responded with an encouraging smile. At that moment, Mark entered the room, followed by Dr. Isabella. Both looked excited, exchanging meaningful glances. "Matthew," Mark began, his voice mixing excitement and a touch of apprehension, "we have news for you." The boy looked at his father curiously, his posture straightening slightly. Dr. Isabella stepped forward, her face softened by a gentle smile. "Matthew, your progress in recent months has been exceptional. We believe you're ready to take the next step in your journey." Matthew tilted his head, intrigued. What step? Mark knelt beside his son, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Son, what do you think about going back to school?" The silence that followed was heavy. Lily carefully observed Matthew's reaction, seeing a mixture of emotions pass over his face, surprise, fear, and perhaps a spark of excitement. "School," Matthew repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Isabella approached, her voice calm and reassuring. "It wouldn't be immediately, Matthew. We would start with short visits for you to get used to the environment and meet some of the teachers and students. If you feel comfortable, we can gradually increase the time you spend there." Matthew was silent for a long moment, his fingers playing distractedly with the piano keys. Finally, he looked at Lily, his eyes seeking comfort and guidance. Lily smiled encouragingly, signing, "It's a big decision, Matthew. What are you feeling?" The boy took a deep breath before responding. I'm a little scared," he admitted. "What if the other kids don't like me? What if I can't talk to them?" Mark pulled Matthew into a gentle hug. "Oh, son, it's natural to feel afraid, but you're so strong, so brave. I'm sure you'll do wonderfully well." Dr. Isabella nodded in agreement. "Besides, Matthew, remember how much progress you've already made. A few months ago, the idea of talking to strangers seemed impossible, didn't it? And look at you now." Matthew seemed to consider this for a moment. Then, to everyone's surprise, he turned to the piano and began to play. It was a new melody, different from the one he had been practicing before. More hesitant at first, but gradually gaining confidence and complexity. When he finished, he looked at the adults in the room, a small smile playing on his lips. "This is how I feel about school," he explained. "Scared at first, but maybe it'll get better with time." Lily felt her heart fill with pride and emotion. Matthew's ability to express his emotions through music continued to amaze her. "That was beautiful, Matthew," she signed. "And very wise, too. It's okay to be afraid, but you're right. Things usually get better with time and practice." Mark, with tears in his eyes, agreed. "Son, I'm so proud of you, and I want you to know that we'll be with you every step of the way." Dr. Isabella smiled, clearly impressed. "Well, Matthew, it seems you've already made your decision. How about we start with a short visit to the school next week, just to get to know the place and maybe one or two teachers?" Matthew hesitated for a moment, then nodded bravely. "Okay," he said, his voice firm despite the slight tremor in his hands. "I want to try." The rest of the afternoon was spent discussing the details of the school visit and answering Matthew's many questions. Lily watched, amazed at the maturity and courage the boy was showing. Later, as the sun began to set, painting the New York sky with shades of pink and gold, Lily found Matthew alone on the balcony, looking thoughtfully at the city skyline. "How are you really feeling?" she asked gently. Matthew turned to her, his eyes reflecting a mixture of emotions. "Scared," he admitted, "but also a little excited. It's strange, isn't it?" Lily smiled, shaking her head. "It's not strange at all. Big changes usually bring a mix of emotions. The important thing is that you're willing to try, even though you're afraid. That, Matthew, is true courage." The boy smiled, a genuine smile that lit up his entire face. "Thank you, Lily, for everything." As the sky darkened and the first stars began to appear, Lily reflected on how far Matthew had come. The path ahead would still have its challenges, but she knew that with his courage and the support of everyone around him, Matthew was ready to face them. Matthew's music continued to echo in her mind, hesitant at first but gaining confidence with each note. It was a perfect metaphor for his journey and a promise of what was to come. The silence that once imprisoned him was transforming into a symphony of possibilities, and Lily could hardly wait to see what melodies the future would bring. The day of Matthew's first visit to the school dawned clear and warm, the New York sun shining brightly over the city's skyscrapers. At Grandview Mansion, the atmosphere was charged with anxiety and expectation. Lily found Matthew in his room, already dressed and sitting on the edge of his bed, his restless hands playing with the hem of his new shirt. She knocked softly on the open door to get his attention. "Good morning, Matthew," she signed with an encouraging smile. "How are you feeling?" Matthew looked at her, his eyes reflecting a mixture of fear and determination. "Nervous," he admitted, his voice a little shaky, "but ready, I think." Lily sat down beside him, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "It's normal to be nervous," she assured. "Remember, this is just a short visit. You don't have to do anything you don't feel comfortable doing." Matthew nodded, taking a deep breath to calm himself. What if I can't speak?" "Then you don't speak," Lily responded simply. "You have other ways to communicate. The important thing is that you're taking this brave step." At that moment, Mark appeared at the door, followed by Dr. Isabella. Both were smiling, but Lily could see the tension in their eyes. "Ready to go?" Mark asked, extending his hand to his son. Matthew hesitated for a moment, then stood up, taking his father's hand. With his other hand, he made a quick gesture to Lily. "Come with us." Lily's heart filled with emotion. "Of course," she signed back. "I'll be with you the whole time." The journey to the school was silent, the tension palpable inside the taxi. Matthew looked out the window, watching the city pass by, his hands tightly gripping those of his father and Lily. When they finally arrived at the school, an imposing old building on the banks of a quiet canal, they were greeted by the principal, Mrs. Ross, a middle-aged woman with a warm smile. "Welcome to Riverside Academy," she said, her voice gentle and welcoming. She bent down to be at Matthew's eye level. "And you must be Matthew. We're very happy to have you here today." Matthew looked at her, then at Lily, who translated the principal's words into sign language. He nodded shyly but didn't say anything. Mrs. Ross didn't seem bothered by Matthew's silence. Instead, she began to guide them through the building, showing the classrooms, the library, and the cafeteria. Matthew observed everything with wide eyes, his initial anxiety slowly giving way to curiosity. When they reached a room at the end of a corridor, Mrs. Ross smiled widely. "And this, Matthew, he is our music room." Matthew's eyes visibly lit up. The room was spacious and full of instruments. Violins, flutes, and in the center, a beautiful grand piano. "We'd love to hear you play someday," Mrs. Ross said gently. "I've heard you're very talented." To everyone's surprise, Matthew stepped forward, approaching the piano. He looked at Lily, then at his father as if asking for permission. Mark nodded encouragingly. "Go ahead, son." Carefully, Matthew sat at the piano. He closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath, then began to play. The melody that flowed from his fingers was soft and sweet, full of contained emotion. The room fell silent, everyone watching in wonder as Matthew played. When the music came to an end, there was a moment of reverent silence before Mrs. Ross began to applaud softly. "That was beautiful, Matthew," she said, her voice full of genuine admiration. Matthew looked up, a small smile playing on his lips, and then, to everyone's amazement, he spoke. "Thank you," he said softly. I like this room." Dr. Isabella exchanged a significant look with Lily and Mark. This was incredible progress. Matthew speaking spontaneously to someone he had just met. The rest of the visit passed in a blur of new impressions and experiences. Matthew didn't speak much more, but his body language was more relaxed, his eyes shining with interest as he absorbed everything around him. When it was finally time to leave, Mrs. Ross said goodbye warmly. "It was a pleasure to meet you, Matthew," she said. "We hope to see you again soon." On the way back to the mansion, Matthew was quiet, but it wasn't the tense silence from before. He seemed thoughtful, processing everything he had experienced. "So?" Mark asked gently. "What did you think?" Matthew considered the question for a moment before answering. "It was different," he said slowly. "A little scary, but I think I liked it. Especially the music room." Lily smiled, feeling a wave of pride. "You were very brave today, Matthew," she signed. "We're all very proud of you." Dr. Isabella agreed. "You took a big step today, Matthew. How would you feel about coming back for another visit next week?" Matthew looked out the taxi window, watching New York pass by. Then he turned back to them with a small smile. "I think I'd like that," he said softly. That night, as the sun set over New York, casting golden hues over the skyline, Lily reflected on the day. It had been a big step for Matthew, a courageous leap into the world beyond the safe walls of Grandview Mansion. The path ahead would still be challenging. There would be difficult days, moments of doubt and fear. But today Matthew had proven to himself and everyone around him that he was ready to face these challenges. As the stars began to dot the night sky, Lily heard the soft notes of the piano, echoing through the corridors of the mansion. It was Matthew, playing the same melody he had played at the school, but this time the music sounded different, more confident, more hopeful. It was the music of a boy who was, slowly but surely, finding his place in the world. And to Lily, it was the most beautiful symphony she had ever heard. The weeks passed, and Matthew's visits to Riverside Academy became more frequent and prolonged. The New York summer was at its peak, and the intense heat seemed to reflect the intensity of the emotions that permeated Grandview Mansion. On a particularly hot afternoon, Lily found Matthew sitting at the piano in the music room, his hands hovering over the keys without touching them. She immediately noticed the tension in his shoulders, the worry line on his forehead. "Matthew," she signed gently, approaching. "Is everything okay?" The boy turned to her, his eyes reflecting a mixture of emotions that Lily couldn't completely decipher. "Lily," he said, his voice low, "what if I'm not good enough?" Lily tilted her head, intrigued. "Good enough for what, Matthew?" He sighed, his fingers finally touching the piano keys, producing a melancholy melody. "For school, to make friends, to be normal." Lily's heart tightened at these words. She sat beside him on the piano bench, patiently waiting for him to elaborate. "Yesterday at school," Matthew continued, his music gaining a more anxious tone, "I heard some boys laughing. They weren't laughing at me, but what if they were? What if they find out that I'm different?" Lily gently placed her hand over Matthew's, interrupting the music. "Matthew," she signed, making sure he was looking at her, "being different isn't a bad thing. Each person is unique with their own strengths and challenges. What matters is how you use your experiences to grow and connect with others." Matthew seemed to consider this for a moment. "But what if I can't communicate with them? What if I get nervous and can't speak?" "Then you use other forms of communication," Lily replied, with an encouraging smile. "Remember how we started, you and I? With drawings, gestures, music. Sometimes words aren't necessary to make a true connection." At that moment, Mark entered the room, followed by Dr. Isabella. Both looked concerned upon noticing Matthew's serious expression. "What's going on here?" Mark asked gently. Lily briefly explained Matthew's concerns. Dr. Isabella approached, her face softening with understanding. "Matthew," she said, kneeling to be at his eye level, "what you're feeling is perfectly normal. We all feel insecure, sometimes especially when facing new situations." Mark sat on the other side of Matthew, placing a protective arm around his son's shoulders. "Son, you are extraordinary. Your journey, your music, your courage, all of this is part of who you are, and who you are is more than enough." Matthew looked at each of them, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "But What if I can't make friends? Making friends takes time, Dr. Isabella responded softly. It's a process, just like learning a new song. You start slowly, note by note, and over time, the melody forms. Matthew's eyes lit up with the musical analogy. He turned to the piano, his hands finding the keys again. This time, the melody that flowed from his fingers was hesitant at first, but gradually gained confidence and complexity. When he finished playing, Matthew looked at Lily with a small smile. "Like making friends?" he asked. Lily smiled back, her heart swelling with pride at Matthew's resilience. "Exactly," she signed. "Each interaction is a note. Some might sound strange at first, but with time and practice, you'll create your own symphony of friendships." Dr. Isabella nodded, clearly impressed. "Matthew, what do you think about using this idea at school? We can create small goals for you, like smiling at a classmate or sharing a drawing, small notes that over time will turn into a beautiful friendship song." Matthew considered the idea for a moment, then slowly nodded. I can try that," he said, his voice gaining a touch of determination. Mark hugged his son, tears of pride in his eyes. "I'm so proud of you, Matthew. Your courage is inspiring." In the days that followed, Matthew faced his fears with a new determination. At school, he began to take small steps, a wave here, a shy smile there. Mrs. Ross, noticing his efforts, organized a small musical performance where Matthew could showcase his talent at the piano. To everyone's surprise and delight, after his performance, a boy from the class approached Matthew. "That was amazing," the boy exclaimed. "Could you teach me to play like that?" Matthew was momentarily speechless, but then, with a quick glance at Lily for encouragement, he nodded and smiled. I can try," he said softly. That moment marked the beginning of Matthew's first true friendship outside of Grandview Mansion. It was a friendship based not on words, but on the universal language of music. That night, back at the mansion, Matthew played a new composition. It was a piece full of hope and possibilities, reflecting the new connections he was beginning to form. Lily watched, her heart overflowing with emotion. Matthew's path would still be challenging, but he was proving, note by note, that he was more than capable of composing his own life symphony. As the stars shone over New York, Matthew's music echoed through the corridors of the mansion, a promise of a future where silence would be just a pause between the beautiful melodies of friendship and growth. Autumn came to New York, bringing with it a cool breeze and golden leaves that danced over the city streets. At Grandview Mansion, the changes of the seasons seemed to reflect the transformations occurring in the lives of its inhabitants, especially in Matthew's. On a sunny Saturday, Lily arrived at the mansion to find an unusual atmosphere of excitement. She found Mark in the living room, his face a mixture of pride and apprehension. "Good morning, Lily," he greeted, his voice tense. "Matthew has a surprise for us." Before Lily could ask more, Matthew entered the room, followed by Dr. Isabella. The boy seemed nervous, but there was a determination in his eyes that Lily immediately recognized. "Lily," Matthew said, his voice firmer than she had ever heard, I want to have a birthday party." Lily blinked, surprised. It was a request she never would have expected to hear from Matthew a few months ago. "A birthday party," she signed, a smile spreading across her face. "That's wonderful, Matthew." Dr. Isabella stepped forward, her face serious, but with a touch of pride. "Matthew came to me with this idea," she explained. "We believe it can be an important step in his socialization, but we also recognize the challenges it may present." Mark nodded, running his hand through his hair nervously. "It's a big step," he said. "I'm proud of Matthew for wanting to try, but also worried." Matthew looked anxiously from one face to another, his fingers unconsciously tapping as if he were playing an invisible piano. "I want to invite some classmates from school," he said softly, and play for them." Lily felt her heart fill with emotion. This was a very different Matthew from the silent boy she had met months ago. She knelt to be at his eye level. "Matthew, this is very brave of you," she signed. "How do you feel about it?" Matthew took a deep breath before answering. "Scared," he admitted, "but excited too. I want to show them who I really am." The days that followed were a whirlwind of preparations. Matthew, with Lily's help, created personalized invitations for each of his classmates, each one decorated with hand-drawn musical notes. Mark took charge of organizing the food and decoration, transforming the mansion's great hall into a welcoming and festive space. Dr. Isabella worked closely with Matthew, helping him prepare for the intense social interaction the party would represent. They practiced small talk, breathing techniques for moments of anxiety, and even rehearsed how Matthew could present his musical performance. On the morning of the party, Lily found Matthew in the music room, seated at the piano, his hands trembling slightly over the keys. "Nervous?" she asked gently. Matthew nodded, his eyes fixed on the piano keys. "What if I can't speak? What if they don't like my music?" Lily sat beside him, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Remember, Matthew, your music is a part of who you are. It's your voice, your way of expressing yourself. Your friends will love it because it's you." Matthew looked at her, a small smile forming on his lips. "Thank you, Lily," he said softly. Then, to her surprise, he hugged her tightly. "For everything." The hours passed quickly, and soon the first guests began to arrive. Matthew greeted them at the door, his initial nervousness giving way to a shy but genuine smile. The party was in full swing when Matthew finally made his way to the piano. The hall fell silent as he sat down, closing his eyes for a moment to concentrate. Then his fingers touched the keys, and music filled the air. It was a piece he had composed especially for the occasion, a melody that spoke of fear and courage, of silence and sound, of isolation and connection. When the last note faded, there was a moment of stunned silence. Then the room erupted into enthusiastic applause. Matthew's eyes opened, a radiant smile lighting up his face as he saw his classmates' reaction. One by one, his friends approached to congratulate him. Matthew talked with them, sometimes hesitant, sometimes with more confidence, but always genuinely. Lily watched from afar, tears of pride in her eyes. Mark approached her, his own emotion evident on his face. "Look at him," Mark said softly. "Who could have imagined this a few months ago?" Dr. Isabella joined them, a satisfied smile on her face. "Matthew's progress has been truly remarkable," she commented, "and much of that is due to you, Lily. Your approach, your patience, you opened up a world of possibilities for him." Lily felt a wave of emotion wash over her. "Matthew did all the hard work," she signed. "I just showed him it was possible." As the party continued around her, Lily reflected on the incredible journey they had all taken. The silent boy she had met months ago was now laughing with his friends, sharing his music, his voice finally found. Matthew's path would still have its challenges, she knew. There would be difficult days, moments of doubt and fear. But today, in this moment, he was shining, his music echoing not just through the corridors of the mansion, but also in the hearts of everyone around him. As the sun set over New York, casting a golden glow through the mansion's windows, Lily knew she was witnessing not just Matthew's birthday, but the birth of a new symphony in his life, a symphony of friendship, courage, and endless possibilities. The weeks following Matthew's birthday party brought subtle but significant changes to Grandview Mansion. The success of the event had given Matthew a new confidence which was reflected in all aspects of his life. On a cool autumn afternoon, Lily arrived at the mansion for her usual session with Matthew, only to discover that the boy wasn't in his room or the music room. Intrigued, she found Mark in the study, a mysterious smile on his face. "Lily," he said, rising to greet her, "Matthew left a message for you. He wants you to meet him in the garden." Curious, Lily headed to the mansion's garden. There, to her surprise, she found Matthew sitting under the old oak tree, surrounded by 3 of his school friends. They were laughing and talking animatedly, and Matthew seemed perfectly at ease among the group. When Matthew saw her, his face lit up with a radiant smile. "Lily!" he called, waving for her to come closer. "Come meet my friends." Lily approached, her heart overflowing with pride and joy. Matthew made the introductions, his voice clear and confident as he spoke and signed simultaneously. "This is John," he said, pointing to a dark-haired boy. "He plays violin. And this is Sophie." A bright-eyed girl waved. She sings in the school choir, and this is Mike, a freckled boy smiled shyly. He's learning to play piano with me. Lily greeted each of them warmly, marveling at the ease with which Matthew interacted with his friends. It was as if the barriers that had once imprisoned him had simply dissolved. Lily, Matthew continued, his expression a mixture of excitement and nervousness. We have an idea. We want to form a music group at school. What do you think? Lily felt a wave of emotion wash over her. Matthew, that's wonderful, she signed enthusiastically. Tell me more about this idea. As Matthew and his friends excitedly explained their plans, Lily noticed Dr. Isabella watching the scene from the mansion's balcony. The doctor had a satisfied smile on her face, and Lily could see the glimmer of tears in her eyes. Later, after Matthew's friends had gone home, Lily found Dr. Isabella in the music room. It's amazing, isn't it? The doctor said softly, to see how far he's come. Lily nodded, feeling emotional. It's as if he were a completely different person, she signed. Dr. Isabella smiled. Not a different person, she gently corrected. Just the truest version of himself, finally free to express himself. At that moment, Matthew entered the room, his eyes shining with excitement. Lily, Dr. Isabella, he said, can I show you something I'm composing for our group? The two women nodded enthusiastically, and Matthew sat at the piano. The music that flowed from his fingers was different from anything Lily had ever heard from him before. It was joyful, full of life and possibilities, as if each note were a celebration of friendship and new beginnings. When he finished playing, Matthew looked at them, a shy smile on his face. What do you think? He asked. It's beautiful, Matthew. Lily signed, her heart overflowing with pride. It really captures the spirit of friendship and joy, Dr. Isabella agreed. It's a remarkable composition, Matthew. You've truly found your voice through music. Matthew's smile widened, but then a shadow of concern passed over his face. But what if I get nervous when we have to perform? What if I make a mistake? Lily knelt beside him, taking his hands in hers. Matthew, she signed gently, remember how much you've already overcome. Every step you've taken, every note you've played has been an act of courage. And now you have friends by your side. You'll support each other. Dr. Isabella approached, placing a comforting hand on Matthew's shoulder. And remember, Matthew, that making mistakes is part of the learning and growing process. The important thing is how you handle those mistakes and move forward. Matthew nodded slowly, absorbing their words. Then, to the surprise of both, he stood up and hugged them. Thank you, he said softly, for believing in me, for helping me find my music. That night, as Lily prepared to leave, she paused for a moment in the hallway, listening to the soft notes of the piano echoing through the house. It was Matthew practicing his new composition. Mark joined her, a serene smile on his face. You know, he said quietly, there was a time when I feared I would never hear music in this house again. And now it's everywhere. Lily smiled, feeling a wave of emotion wash over her. The music was always inside him, she signed. He just needed to find the courage to let it out. As Lily walked home that night, the stars shining over the New York skyline, she reflected on the incredible journey they had all taken. The silence that had once dominated Grandview Mansion had been replaced by a symphony of possibilities. And although the path ahead might still have its challenges, Lily knew that Matthew now had the tools and the courage to face them. His music, once a solitary expression, had become a bridge to the world, connecting him with friends, family, and a future full of promise. Matthew's melody continued to echo in her mind as she walked, a song of hope, courage, and the transformative power of music and love. Winter had come to New York, enveloping the city in a cloak of fog and mystery. At Grandview Mansion, the atmosphere was charged with expectation and nervousness. Matthew and his newly formed music group were preparing for their first public performance at the school's winter festival. On a cold December morning, Lily arrived at the mansion to find Matthew already awake and sitting at the piano, his fingers dancing nervously over the keys without actually touching them. She could feel the tension emanating from him, even before entering the room. "Good morning, Matthew," she signed softly, approaching. "How are you feeling today?" Matthew looked at her, his eyes reflecting a mixture of fear and determination. "Nervous," he admitted. "The performance is in 3 days, Lily. What if I forget the notes? What if I can't speak in front of all those people?" Lily sat beside him on the piano bench, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "It's normal to feel afraid, Matthew," she signed, "but remember how much you've already overcome. Your music is powerful, and your friends will be there with you." At that moment, Mark entered the room, followed by Dr. Isabella. Both seemed to immediately perceive Matthew's anxiety. "Son," Mark said gently, "what's worrying you?" Matthew took a deep breath before responding. "What if I disappoint everyone? You've all worked so hard to help me, and my friends are counting on me." Dr. Isabella approached, her face softening with understanding. "Matthew," she said, "success isn't measured by perfection. It's measured by the courage to try to express yourself, to share your music with the world." Mark nodded, adding, "We're proud of you no matter what happens on stage. The mere fact that you're willing to perform is already a huge victory." Lily observed Matthew absorb these words, seeing a spark of determination ignite in his eyes. "What do you think about practicing some breathing techniques?" she suggested. "They can help calm your nerves before the performance." Matthew agreed, and they spent the next hour working on breathing exercises and positive visualization. Dr. Isabella watched with approval, occasionally offering suggestions. In the days that followed, the mansion transformed into a center of frenzied activity. Matthew's friends came daily to rehearse, filling the house with music and laughter. Lily noticed with joy how Matthew seemed to flourish in this environment, his confidence visibly growing with each rehearsal. On the eve of the performance, after the final rehearsal, Matthew gathered his friends, Lily, Mark, and Dr. Isabella, in the music room. I want to thank all of you," he said, his voice trembling slightly with emotion, "for believing in me, for helping me find my voice. Tomorrow, no matter what happens on stage, I know I won't be alone." There were emotional hugs and words of encouragement. Lily felt her heart overflow with pride at seeing how far Matthew had come. Finally, the big day arrived. The school auditorium was packed, a sea of anxious and expectant faces. Backstage, Matthew and his friends prepared, the nervousness palpable, in the air. Lily found Matthew alone in a corner, his hands trembling slightly. She approached, gently signing, "Remember, Matthew, your music is your voice. Let it speak for you." Matthew nodded, taking a deep breath. Then, to Lily's surprise, he smiled, a genuine and confident smile. "I'm ready," he said. When the group took the stage, an expectant silence fell over the audience. Matthew sat at the piano, closing his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, his gaze found Lily's in the front row, next to Mark and Dr. Isabella. Then his fingers touched the keys and the music began to flow. It was an original composition by Matthew, a piece that spoke of silence and sound, of fear and courage, of isolation and connection. As the music developed, Lily could see the tension leave Matthew's body, replaced by a serene confidence. The other members of the group joined in one by one. John's violin, Sophie's clear voice, Mike's flute. Together, they wove a sonic tapestry that seemed to tell Matthew's story, of his journey from the shadows into the light. When the last note faded, there was a moment of stunned silence. Then the audience erupted into enthusiastic applause. Lily saw tears in Mark's eyes, a proud smile on Dr. Isabella's face. Matthew stood up, his face radiant, and then, to everyone's amazement, he stepped up to the microphone. "Thank you," he said, his voice clear and firm, echoing through the auditorium. "This music is for everyone who has ever felt silenced, for everyone who is finding their voice. Never stop believing in the power of your own music." The ovation that followed was deafening. Lily saw Matthew being hugged by his friends on stage, his face shining with pure, uncomplicated joy. Later, amidst the celebrations at Grandview Mansion, Lily found a quiet moment with Matthew. "How do you feel?" she asked. Matthew thought for a moment before answering. "Free," he said finally. Like I could do anything now. Lily smiled, feeling her eyes fill with tears of joy. You can, Matthew, she signed. You always could. You just needed to believe in yourself. As the party continued around her, Lily reflected on the incredible journey they had all taken. The silent boy she had met months ago was now the center of attention, laughing and talking confidently. Matthew's music had become more than just notes on a piano. It was a statement of who he was, a bridge to the world, a symphony of courage and infinite possibilities. And as the sound of laughter and music filled the mansion, Lily knew that this wasn't the end of Matthew's story, but just the beginning of a new and exciting chapter.